Welcome to the Festive Tech Calendar 2022. My session today is on audience targeting for Viva Connections. My name is Nikki Chapple. I'm a Microsoft MVP and the Principal Cloud Architect at Cloudway. I've got over 30 years experience in IT and business transformation and balancing that need between productivity and security. So I'm passionate about everything Microsoft 365 governance and compliance. I'm a community speaker and blogger. I blog at nikkichapple.com, and I'm also the co-host on all things M365 Compliance podcast, and also part of the Viva Explorer group. So I'm the Viva Guardian. So I'm the one that keeps you safe, making sure you understand the governance and compliance elements of Viva. So the agenda today is I'm going to talk just a little bit about what Viva Connections is, an overview. Then I'm going to talk about audience targeting and the need for it. And then we're actually going to look at a pragmatic example of how to create audience targets, how to use audience targets, and then the end user experience. So the first question, what is Viva Connections? Viva Connections is part of the Viva suite. So there's now 9 modules within at Viva, which is an employee engagement experience platform that really is empowering people and teams to work together and the best. So Viva Connections is one element of that. It allows you to communicate with your employees via Teams. So that's really important. Teams is that home where everyone goes. Now you're pulling in all of that internal communications direct into the Teams application. So how does Viva Connections work? So it's that personalized communication and resources. It allows you to create that tailored experience to specific employee groups, roles, or geographic areas using targeted news, conversations, and content. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. It's how do we target the content to the right users? So Viva Connections is 3 elements. The first element is a feed. So this is a feed of information from SharePoint News and Yammer community content. So that is tailored to the employees based on what Yammer communities and SharePoint sites they have access to. The second area is resources. So this is your kind of global navigation to allow people to quickly find their way around SharePoint. With this navigation, you can target links to appropriate groups of people. So for example, if you're in the IT department, there may be a set of links to specific IT resources. This ensures that you don't have too long navigation. We want to make it easy and quick for people to find their way around. And then thirdly, we have a personalized dashboard. This allows you to create cards with either content and communications that you want to target particular groups of people. Now, the dashboard cards can either be created from like out of the box cards. So these are really quick, simple things that you can set up. Things like if you're using the approvals process, you can have approvals card. If you're using the tasks and to do, you can have a card there that shows you your activities you need to do today. For example, if you're using shifts, other Teams apps, etc. So you can have out of the box cards. Secondly, there are a lot of third-party applications that have now created integrations into Viva Connections. Fantastic way if you're using any of these products for someone to be able to click on Viva Connections and go directly into that application. And then lastly, what you can create is custom cards for your dashboard. So this means you can integrate with other applications. This will require an IT configuration. And then lastly on here, you can then also create multi-language dashboards as well. So you can target content in the right language to people. So what is audience targeting? Audience targeting allows you to target specific content to user groups. So why do we need to use audience targeting? Well, we're living in this world of communication and data overload. We have so many Teams chats, we have email messages, we have content from all over the places. And what audience targeting allows us to do is to target the right content at the right employees to provide better engagement. What we're effectively doing is we're cutting out that noise. So Viva Connections uses audience targeting to define specific employee groups. For example, you might want to target a card or a navigation to users in a specific country. Alternatively, you might have communications where you just want to target all managers or all non-managers. Then you can also use targeting to target more than one group. You can have up to 50 different groups in an audience targeting. So it doesn't just have to be one, you can target to lots of different groups at the same time. So let's go and have a look now at a pragmatic way of how we're actually going to create these audience targetings. So we're going to have a use case and we're going to be looking at Miriam Graham. So she's accountable for employee engagement at Contoso. She's new into this role and she wants to improve the maturity of our internal communications process. Currently, they're using email distribution groups. It's kind of manual, ad hoc process, and it's really overwhelming to try and keep those email distribution lists up to date. So she wants a better way to target communications. So she wants to understand the impact of moving to Viva Connections. What does she need to do to make that experience better? Importantly, she needs to make sure she restricts some communication and content from particular groups of users. For example, she only wants to target Contoso news to permanent employees and not to contract staff. She wants to understand how to create and maintain those audience targets. And finally, she wants to make sure the accuracy of the audiences. She doesn't want to have to rely on somebody manually having to maintain those lists and groups. So step one, we need to understand really the impact of the change. So we can use a maturity model with 5 different layers to actually try and understand where you are. And then we can see where Viva Connections is. So you can see what changes and activities you need to do. So level 100 is the initial level, the most basic level. This is where you're using manual email distribution lists. It's untargeted and your communications are email based. Moving up to level 200, it's more managed. You're starting to have some ad hoc governments. It might not be centrally coordinated, but there might be some areas where they are doing some targeting, other areas where it's just kind of generic communication. But it's really uncontrolled channels. Different areas of the business are working in different ways. Once we move up to level 300, this is more defined. You've got some sort of consistent governance process going across your organisation. You're using channel targeting and you're resharing messages, maybe across different types of channels. But often with this, it excludes those frontline workers because it's really targeted to people that have got desktops and laptops. Now, once we move into level 400, now this is where Viva Connections is really positioned. We're talking about predictable internal communications now. It's data-driven. It's got data quality. We can have dynamic groups so we can automate those members. We're not reliant on somebody having to manually add and remove people in there. We've now got to that area where we've got those personalised communications and content aggregation. So the right contact goes to the right people at the right time. It's also single touch because we're surfacing that information via Microsoft Teams. And not only is it now the desktop, we can extend this through to the mobile devices. Therefore, frontline workers have now got access to the same information as your office workers. Now, you can extend it further. So Viva Connections is in kind of multiple layers. I showed you earlier on where you've got the out-of-the-box connections and third-party connections. But you can extend up to level 500 optimized. You can start integrating with other applications, start that development. You can start looking at AI-based information on your users. Extend it out into multilingual and do more tracking and insights. So it's kind of a continuous maturity level. So Megan has worked out that she's really only at level 100 at the moment because she's relying on email distribution lists. It's kind of been untargeted, a lot of all staff emails, and as I said, it was email-based communications. So now she needs to understand how to target those groups for her internal communications. The sorts of way you could target are based on, companies or divisions. So for larger organisations, you may want to target on location, different countries, geographic areas. It may be departments. You might be looking at job levels, senior managers, frontline workers. It might be a particular job role. So somebody is a business change champion, for example, or the life cycle, onboarding of new starters. Might be an employee status, such as an impermanent employee, part-time workers, contractors, etc. It may be their interests and groups. It might be that they are interested in a particular area or information. And you may have already created some sort of personas in your organisation that you want to use. So you have a look and think of how you want to segment your employees to target those right communications to the right groups of users. So Miriam's decided that she needs to do her audience groups based on divisions such as the retail or the Contoso group. They're based in the UK and the US, so she wants to be able to have different communications to target those different countries. For example, you're going to have different holidays, different sort of contracts and processes that are country specific. Then there's going to be information that's maybe targeted at specific departments. So in this scenario, we might want to look at marketing and sales, IT, etc. And Miriam wanted to make sure that the Contoso news was only targeted to permanent employees. So she needs to capture that employment type. And then she's really wants to look at how she can support new starters and kind of business champion, those role-based activities. So she's decided this is what she would like to do. Now she needs to work out how is she going to do this. So how is she going to take those groups of users and create those audience targets? Well, audience targets use Microsoft 365 groups. So you could be a team as a form of Microsoft 365 group. It can be a Yammer community or a Microsoft 365 group. Now, in addition to this, you can also use Azure AD security groups. So that's where you've got groups where you want to segment users, but they don't need to have any communication or kind of collaboration type activities. You're going to create a group purely for the kind of Viva Connections communications. What she has found out is that she can't use her existing distribution groups. So she's going to have to change her processes. She's going to have to find out how she can kind of map her kind of employee segmentation onto those groups above. And you can't create audience targets based of lists of individual users. So she's worked out actually she needs to think about how she's going to create her target audiences. So why not look at what you've already got? So let's consider our audience target groups. Number one, are there existing groups that are already available that we can use? So rather than starting off from scratch, you may have existing teams, Yammer groups, etc. If not, what type of group do I need to create? If people are going to need to collaborate as well, think about considering maybe a team or a Yammer community. If it's purely just for this Viva Connections targeting, then you don't need that Microsoft 365 group basings. Think about using an Azure AD group. So she looks at the existing team structure. So they've already got teams for the different departments, such as sales, marketing, retail. And they've also got a team created for business champions. So she can start using those groups for targeting. She's got a Yammer-wide group for the whole of the Contoso organisation, and an Azure AD group's been set up for the retail environment already. However, she may have some new groups, such as she needs to be able to target US and UK, and she may want to send some also communications to particular offices or stores in case, for example, that there's an incident or something's happening particularly in a location. So you need to consider how you're going to do that. And also she needs to be able to capture whether somebody is a permanent or a contract employee. So these are new, so you need to think, how am I going to create those? So one of the ways that we can create groups is we can use something called dynamic membership. We can automate this process. So we don't need to worry about people manually adding and removing people in. So what we can do is we can consider adding attributes to the user profile, such as company name. So that company name, they're in Contoso-Retail. So we could use that to create a particular group. The department is retail. Well, we've got a team called retail, so we might want to automatically add the person into that team based on that. Other information, office locations, we can capture that information. We can capture their usage location as well, so we know what country they're in. And also, you've got custom attributes, so we can use custom attributes to work out whether somebody's permanent or a contractor, and we can work out when somebody started. So that's quite useful. So we can use that, but it does rely on Azure AD Premium 1 licenses. Then secondly, we can look at reviewing our kind of onboarding and offboarding process. So if we want to capture those user attributes and then based on those attributes, add and remove people to the groups, then we need to make sure those user attributes are up to date for joiners, also people moving roles and people leaving the organisation. So normally that process starts from HR, who sends some information, a request to IT, and IT is then responsible for publishing that information out. Well, what if you could automate the process? As soon as HR send that request to IT, if IT updates the information on the user profile, then they can automatically be added to these different types of groups here. We're not reliant then on IT support also having to add them into the groups. Or we're not reliant on maybe the team owner having to maintain some of those groups. So we had a look at that and the decision was, well, let's create some dynamic groups for Contoso. So we wanted to have a sales and marketing audience group. So in that scenario, you can have add all users, department equals marketing, and all users, department equals sales. So they're the teams that we had created. For UK, we can use usage location equals UK. Now in that scenario, there wasn't a identified need for collaboration, so we kind of used a Azure AD security group. The same for the offices, we might want to be able to target an office or store, retail store locations, and we want to use custom attributes as well, those extension attributes. So again, we can create your dynamic groups through that. Importantly, not all groups need to be dynamic. So for example, business champions, they are used at different times. So how do we use audience targeting? Well, we're now looking at Debra. So she's responsible for maintaining the operational employee engagement program. She wants to be able to share news and communications, target content to specific groups, and also importantly, extend those communications to the front line. So let's have a look at how we can use audience targeting. Well, we can use audience targeting with the resources. So this is the navigation to get you around your different resources that you've got in your SharePoint sites. So you can target these links to particular groups of people. So it's mapping those audience targeting and saying, what are the most important links that they need to see? Which are which groups need to see which links? Then we can use audience targeting with those dashboard cards as well. So we can create the cards and then they could be targeted to different groups of people. So what Debra does is when she's creating the cards, or this will work the same with the resources, when you've created it, you've got an option to say audience targeting. This allows you to add up to 50 different groups. So remember, that's your Teams, Yammer, Microsoft 365 groups, and your Azure AD groups here. So in this example where we're showing here, we've got a sales and marketing news cards. And Debra wants to target that to people who are members of the sales team and people who are members of the marketing team. So she would do that for each of the card. One thing to consider is naming standards. Obviously, it's important that you target the right group. So make sure you're aware of which group to pick, because you may have hundreds, if not thousands, of groups that you'll have in your organization. So it's important that the right group is selected. So once that's done, what does it look like from an end user experience? So let's look at 3 different people from different areas within Contoso to see how it works. So let's look at Megan. Megan is an office worker that's using a laptop. So she will see the desktop experience of the card. She's a permanent member of staff. So she will see the top news stories, because we only wanted to have the news for permanent staff and want to exclude contractors. She's in Contoso-Retail, so she'll see the Contoso-Retail related information. She's in the UK, so we've got different help desks in the UK and the US, so we want to make sure that if she needs to raise a ticket, it's to the UK help desk. In the marketing team, so therefore she will get access to the sales and marketing news. Plus she's a business champion, and there's a kind of a current campaign at the moment to upskill the existing champions. So that information is kind of added to her cards as well. Well, let's look at Adele now. Adele is using a mobile device because she's a frontline worker. So she gets a different view, but it's now on the mobile rather than on the computer. And again, the content will be targeted to her. She's a contractor, so she doesn't see those top news stories. But she's still in Contoso-Retail, so there she gets access to the same card, even though she's on a mobile device. She's in the US, so if she needs to raise a help desk ticket, she wants to be going to the US help desk, so she gets a card for that. She's in store 1, and there may be some specific news, such as this one. There's a security alert. They're going to be doing increased bag checks for that day. And because she's a new starter, well, she's being prompted with a series of onboarding, top tips and communications. Now let's look at Alan. Alan's working in IT, and he uses a laptop and a mobile, so he can see his experience from both the desktop version and also the mobile. He's in Contoso Group, so he's not going to see that news for Contoso-Retail. He's a permanent member of staff, so he can see the top news. Again, doesn't matter which device he's using, he can get access to the cards from anywhere. And because he's in the UK, he will see the UK help desk. So that's kind of showing you that you can quite easily configure the dashboards, or also, the resources if you wanted to make sure that you can kind of segment your content and make it easy for people to get access to those resources that they use on a regular basis. So the summary really is we're using audience targeting in Viva Connections for a better employee experience. Thank you for joining my session today. And don't forget to look out for the other sessions at festivetechcalendar.com. If you want to find out more about me, please scan the QR code to get my details. Thank you.